Member for East Hills, accordingly member for Newtown.
Thank you, Speaker. I rise on behalf of the Greens to speak in the debate on the Community Housing Providers Adoption of National Law Amendment Bill 2025, which the Greens support with some reluctance. This bill seeks to do three things, two of which are very good and which the Greens agree are absolutely overdue. First, it would create a register of affordable housing dwellings in New South Wales, so we know how much and where affordable housing exists. Second, it would establish a compliance and regulatory framework for managers of affordable housing. We strongly support both of these components, about which I'll go into more detail shortly. It is the third element of this bill about which the Greens have significant reservations. The third element of this bill formalises a pathway for private for-profit entities like developers to operate affordable housing. I will explain in greater detail shortly why the Greens are so concerned about this element, but I say from the start that we are disappointed that a mechanism enabling further private profits off an essential service like housing, specifically housing for people who are recognised as requiring housing support, is buried in a bill which we would otherwise enthusiastically support. There are also concerns that potentially the fact that we are considering this bill at a Friday afternoon sitting slot, when we had originally expected that this bill was not going to come on until the September sitting and had been given, and I understand that other stakeholders had been given the intention that it was not going to be debated and passed through to September, that given the fact that it includes that element causes us even further concern. The Greens are feeling more and more cynical about the pre-election messaging of the New South Wales Labor Party that they would stop the privatisation agenda, that the Liberals and Nationals prioritised for over a decade. It is critical that we recognise that while it is absolutely beneficial and welcome that some elements of this bill are here, that hidden in this bill, as we see often is the case in the way that the Labor government is behaving, hidden in an announcement that sounds wonderful or a commitment to deliver on a change, is actually something that is much more sinister and much more concerning, but is never actually the focus of the main headline, the main social media square, or indeed the announcements. But let's start with the good news, shall we? Division 2 of the bill will establish a register of all affordable housing in New South Wales, something which should have been established many, many years ago. The Greens strongly support the idea of an affordable housing register, so strongly in fact that in May last year we introduced a private members bill that would have done exactly this. Unfortunately, at that time, the government didn't support the establishment of this register, or indeed they just don't like supporting Greens bills. We can take from that what we wish. But it seems that now the Minister is very happy to have taken this up, and indeed we are happy to see that the government is taking on these ideas. Because as I said when introducing the private members bill, currently, because affordable housing is approved by a range of consent authorities and we have no centralised tracking or database, it is impossible to get an accurate picture of where and how much affordable housing exists in New South Wales. I do not think that anyone could tell us that information. That is of huge concern given that the legislation for affordable housing can expire within 15 years. 100 affordable housing units could be due to expire and return to the private rental market tomorrow when we are in the middle of a housing crisis and no one would know about it. We could not move to extend that term for 5 or 10 years because we genuinely do not know where the affordable housing is, because the information is not recorded in any systematic way. Yes, it is true. It is absurd that we have had some form of affordable housing in New South Wales since now repealed State Environment Planning Policy Affordable Rental Housing Bill entered into force in 2009, and that there has never been a centralised record of how much or where this housing exists. Thankfully, this long overdue need is finally being addressed in this bill, and proposed Section 27C requires the Community Housing Registrar, who I acknowledge is here for this debate, to maintain the register, which would capture the following information for each affordable housing dwelling: the street address, the land title identification information, the names and contact details of the registered owner and manager of the dwelling, the number of bedrooms in the dwelling, and other information prescribed by regulations. Proposed Section 27E of the bill places the onus on development approvers to provide this information to the registrar as soon as practicable after development approval is given. I note that during the debate on the legislation in the Legislative Council, my Greens colleague, Abigail Boyd, sought to amend proposed section 27C to also require the level of accessibility of a dwelling with reference to the livable housing design standard to be captured by the register, as was the case in our Greens private members bill. While this amendment was unsuccessful, I acknowledge and I welcome the assurances from the Minister's office that the regulations will indeed require the capture of this information. And we do hope the Minister will stick to this commitment given the housing injustice faced by many people with a disability and the lack of commitment from New South Wales Labor to mandate silver standard accessibility for new developments. I will be moving an amendment on behalf of the Greens to bolster the information collected in the register proposed by Division 2 by also requiring the Minister to provide an annual statement to Parliament about the overall state and quality of affordable housing in New South Wales, rather than just on a by-dwelling level at the registrar, as the register collects. The second thing this bill seeks to do is require operators of affordable housing to comply with the Affordable Housing Ministerial Guidelines, which set out important rules like eligibility for affordable housing, rent setting and allocations. Bizarrely, there is currently no requirement for entities... Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to interrupt.
Oh, on Friday.
Sorry, Speaker, I thought the Leader of the House was seeking the call as he walked up to the table, but it seems he was getting a pen.
Keep going.
Bizarrely, there is currently no requirement for entities that manage affordable housing to actually comply with them. Stakeholders have told us that some providers believe, whether genuinely or not, that the guidelines don't apply to them and are therefore setting rents and allocating dwellings however they see fit. This is obviously far from ideal, and setting a clear legislative requirement that all managers of affordable housing must comply with the guidelines is a sensible step. Division 4 of this bill seeks to establish statutory obligations for entities involved in the delivery and management of affordable housing. Proposed Section 27J requires persons giving development approval to notify the registrar of each dwelling built as affordable housing and provide the information required by proposed Section 27E within a development before applying for an occupation certificate. The same section would also require persons giving development approval to provide the registrar with proof that a responsible housing manager as defined by the bill has been appointed. Proposed sections 27K and 27L make it incumbent upon both owners and managers of affordable housing to ensure dwellings are managed in accordance with the affordable housing guidelines and establish other obligations around notifying the registrar within 14 days of the change in manager. And proposed section 27M empowers the registrar to enforce the obligations outlined in each of these sections with penalties of up to $11,000 applicable to any breaches. The Greens welcome this compliance and penalty framework, but we express serious concerns that the affordable housing guidelines themselves are not fit for purpose and must be revisited as a priority. The guidelines allow rent to be set at a discount of at least 20% of market rent and state that households on very low and low income should not pay more than 25% of their gross income and rent. The 2024 Greens Affordable Housing Bill would have sought to set statutory caps on rents in affordable housing at no more than 30% of a tenant's income. It is widely accepted that 30% of income is the most someone should or can spend on rent before they are considered to be in rental stress. Our office knows for a fact that the rent setting rules in the guidelines mean some community housing providers charge tenants up to 40% of their income on rent, putting them in housing stress. The Greens understand that the guidelines are indeed under review and call on the Minister to clarify the timeline and the process for public consultation on those guidelines. The third thing that this bill would do would establish a new class of entities who can manage affordable housing in New South Wales, aptly called affordable housing managers. In New South Wales, affordable housing properties can currently only be managed by registered community housing providers, the majority of which are non-profit organisations. A small number of real estate agents are currently registered as community housing providers, meaning that there is nothing stopping them from accessing government assistance in the form of grants or subsidies. Speaker, I seek a short extension of time so I can address the third element of this bill.
Member for Newtown seeks an extension of time. All those of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. Extension is granted.
Thank you, Speaker. I acknowledge that the Minister in her second reading speech explicitly referenced these 15 real estate agencies currently registered as CHPs and described them as anomalies that need to be rectified. If this bill passes, those 15 agencies would be transitioned onto the register of affordable housing managers and prevented from accessing financial subsidies from the state or federal governments intended for community housing. They would also be required to comply with the obligations as set out in Division 4 that I have already described. And this is absolutely a welcome step. The Greens take issue, however, with the fact that this bill leaves open the door for any other for-profit entity who does not already manage affordable housing dwellings to indeed enter that space and do so. In a briefing with the Minister's office on this bill in May, my office explicitly asked if it would enable developers like Mirvac to manage affordable housing, and we were told that it would. Indeed, proposed Section 27I of the bill is void of any criteria that must be met in order to become an affordable housing manager. It seems that anyone can pop in the form approved by the registrar, provide the fee and information prescribed by the regulations, which we have not yet seen, and become an affordable housing manager. Serco, Bupa, Lendlease, Daycorp, Transurban, the list goes on. We are in a dire housing affordability crisis precisely because developers and investors have been encouraged, even incentivised, to treat housing as an investment asset class and a way to make enormous profit, not as a human right. Creating yet another avenue for developers and investors to speculate in housing is not going to do anything to solve the housing crisis. If anything, it makes it worse. Non-profit registered community housing providers are required by their nature and often their own governance structures to reinvest rental income and proceeds from any sales into more affordable and community housing. In other words, there is a guarantee that any income will be put to beneficial use. There is no such guarantee for developers, investors, or any other for-profit affordable housing managers. The only thing that is guaranteed is that they will profit off people struggling to keep a roof over their heads, while loose guidelines will allow them to push tenants into rental stress, charge up to 80% of astronomically high unregulated private rental market costs, and still call their product affordable housing. What could possibly go wrong? The Greens will be moving amendments that seek to limit the gifts that this bill would present to developers and investors by excluding them from the affordable housing density bonuses on offer under the Housing SEP. And I will talk in more detail about this when I address the amendments. I want to end by acknowledging that we have been having this debate at the tail end of Homelessness Week. It is disappointing that in any week, let alone this one, New South Wales Labor government seems incapable of moving forward on housing without taking one step back. They can end no grounds evictions, but will quietly wind back the evidence requirements. They can regulate affordable housing, but in doing so also create a new avenue for people to profit off an essential human right. And meanwhile, rents remain at record highs. Over 65,000 approved applicants are waiting endlessly for public housing still, and the rates of homelessness are climbing steeply. Refugees and people seeking asylum who are locked out of public housing, and indeed the New South Wales homelessness strategy doesn't even mention them, are particularly impacted. With the Asylum Seekers Centre in the electorate of Newtown raising the alarm that more than 50% of people seeking asylum who seek casework with them are at risk of homelessness in this state. In a recent survey of people seeking asylum, they found that 71% had experienced homelessness, and this is a completely unacceptable situation and is only the tip of the iceberg when so much more needs to be done. We in this place need to act with urgency and conviction that this housing crisis demands, and we need to push back on the idea that we must always accept some bad with the good. As such, the Greens reluctantly support this bill in Homelessness Week because we know the risks that are contained in it and also the potential for what the Housing Minister could actually be delivering to address homelessness in this state.
Thank you. Clauses 1 and 2 and Schedules 1 and 2, the question is that these clauses be agreed to. I call the member for Newtown.
Thank you, Speaker. I seek leave to move amendments 1 to 3 on sheet C2025-160C together.
Is leave granted? Leave's granted.
Thank you, Speaker. I move amendments 1 to 3 on sheet C2025-160C. These amendments, just for those that are not across them, because I appreciate, as I acknowledged, you're now in the second reading debate. We did not expect that we would be debating this legislation in the chamber this week. We were of the understanding that this legislation would come through and pass our House in September. And so I want to acknowledge that members have not had the opportunity to look in detail at these amendments, because indeed they were only in draft form this morning, because we hadn't expected that we would be debating this bill today. That said, I want to acknowledge that there has been probably about a month worth of conversations that we've been having with the Minister's office in relation to amendments, our views on the bill, and indeed some of the other changes that have occurred. So while I acknowledge that maybe not all members have seen this, I acknowledge that the government is very aware and has been aware of our intentions to want to see a statement like this made to Parliament. These amendments would seek to require the Minister for Housing to prepare and table each year a ministerial statement on the overall status of affordable housing in New South Wales. This would supplement the information provided on a by dwelling basis in the register established by this bill by providing a holistic overview of the total pool of affordable housing across the state, something that I think we all agree would be a very good thing for this Parliament to have a line of sight to. It is good to have by dwelling data captured by the register, and it would be even better if there was a requirement for this data to actually be regularly analysed and reported on. This isn't something that we have dreamt up as something that does not have a precedent in legislation. In fact, we modelled this amendment exactly off the New South Wales Labor government's creative statement to Parliament bill that was passed through both houses of Parliament earlier this year, that would require the Arts Minister to report to Parliament every 3 years on the status, health and progress within the arts. I think that we would all agree that while arts are an important part of our ecosystem in New South Wales, that housing, and indeed the housing crisis, is a critical element. And so therefore what this amendment would seek to do would be require the Minister to table an annual review and analysis of the information on the register by the Minister's office, and the tabling of a report on A, the total number of registrable dwellings in 1, the state of New South Wales, 2, each local government area, and then B, the change in the number of registrable dwellings over the previous 12 months, C, the number of registrable dwellings that on the 30th of June of the year in which the statement is prepared are vacant and have been vacant for 30 days or more, the number of registrable dwellings that comply with each of the following accessibility performance levels: silver level, gold level, platinum level. E, the percentage of registrable dwellings occupied by the following as determined in accordance with the affordable housing guidelines: very low income households, low income households, moderate income households. The percentage of registrable dwellings for which the rent charged is the following ranges: between 65 and less than 70% of market rent, between 70% and less than 75% of market rent, and between 75% and less than 80% of market rent. This would then allow the Parliament to retain oversight over the information contained within the register, because as it currently stands, the information would be gathered by the registrar. There would be a register that exists, but what this would seek to do is bring some light to that information in a way that the Parliament would have a line of sight as to the situation of where the state of affordable housing is in New South Wales. It wouldn't require a change to policy or indeed a change to the way that affordable housing or affordable housing managers are delivered. It would simply take the information that is available, bring it into light, have a public report on it, have the Minister be able to report on it. In particular, I draw attention to the proposed section 27M, B, E and F, which pertain to who affordable housing is being allocated to and how much rent is being charged. Both of these pieces of information are critical to understanding whether affordable housing is actually living up to its name as being genuinely affordable, but also ensuring, as the member for Fairfield acknowledged, the desperate need for housing solutions in his electorate, the need to recognise that affordable housing is being utilised by those who need it most. We need to understand whether very low and low income households are actually being allocated affordable housing, particularly given this bill enables for-profit entities to make further profits as affordable housing managers. It's not a hypothetical scenario, and we know that there are situations where this has occurred in the past, and I very much hope that the government will support this amendment, which would allow the Minister to make a statement to Parliament.